I am Adesua Omoran, and the United Kingdom Parliament has been deliberating on a petition by some groups and individuals requesting the Parliament to implement sanctions against the Nigerian government and officials for alleged human rights violations during the NSAS protests as well as the Lekki shootings. And that's up in the next hour after the break. Please keep it here on the channel.
Misused by security forces in Nigeria or in any circumstances deployed on activities which suppress peaceful protests. My third question for ministers is what representations they have or are prepared to make to the Nigerian government about human rights abuses against Christians. Charities such as Christian Solidarity Worldwide and Open Doors have documented a worrying increase in attacks on Christian communities in Nigeria by terrorist groups over recent years, and their plight must never be forgotten. Fourthly and finally, I would ask ministers to step up engagement with the Nigerian diaspora in the United Kingdom. There are many British Nigerians who want to deploy their knowledge and their understanding of the country to help shape the UK's response to unfolding events in Nigeria. Worried about the situation and distressed about the Lekki tollgate tragedy and other loss of life, they're brimming with enthusiasm to help, to make a difference, and to be involved in building a better future for Nigeria. In this regard, I particularly want to thank my constituent, Lara Ayodeji Akindeji, for contacting me to share her concerns and offer her help. Her support and briefing for this debate has been invaluable. So my final request would be to ask the Minister to meet me and a group of constituents to discuss these matters further. Mr. Gray, Nigeria is a country with so much going for it. A young and hugely talented population, massive natural resources, and a rapidly developing economy. If the NSAS protesters secured the reform and the improved governance they're demanding, Nigeria could become a formidable economic powerhouse. And the diaspora community here can be a vital bridge linking our two countries in a brighter future of increased trade and prosperity in the years to come. Thank you.
This House considered e-petition 554150 related to Nigeria and the sanctions regime. Kate Osama.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I thank the honourable member for Chipping and Barnett for her passionate opening for this debate. I would also like to thank Silas Oja for creating this petition, which now has more than 220,000 signatures, including almost 2,000 of my own constituents in Edmonton who signed the petition we are debating today. And I'm sure that I'm not the only member to have been inundated with messages from constituents in recent months, urging them to do whatever they can to lend their voice to the NSAS protests. As the chair of the All-Party Group for Nigeria, I was particularly keen to speak on this debate and highlight the need for the UK to stand with the Nigerian people against an increasingly cruel and brutal regime. The situation in Nigeria is incredibly serious, with tragedy after tragedy unfolding on the streets in state after state, as the Nigerian government and its security forces take ever more repressive measures to end a protest movement, which has given hope to millions across the globe. The NSAS movement is not just about disbanding the special anti-robbery squads. It is a movement led by the youth of Nigeria who took to the streets of Nigeria peacefully, demanding an end to brutality, extortion, and extrajudicial executions, and for a truly democratic Nigeria. The bravery of the youth-led movement will never be defeated. Today, we need to consider how the government should respond to both the movement itself and the violent actions of the Nigerian regime. However,
the report from Amnesty International documented 82 cases of human rights violations between January 2017 and May 2020, including various methods of torture against detainees such as hanging, mock execution, beating, punching and kicking, burning with cigarettes, waterboarding, near asphyxiation with plastic bags, forcing victims into stressful bodily positions and sexual violence and rape. It is a shocking record of behaviour. And yet few of these cases have been investigated and hardly any officers have been brought to justice on credible accounts of torture and other ill treatment. The authorities have promised investigations, but they often have simply not occurred. And the federal government of Nigeria has repeatedly promised to reform SARS, but has failed to do so. And of course, the protests we've seen recently originate not only in that record of brutality, but in other documented incidents across the country in Delta State, in Oyo State, and in recent days I've received reports of extrajudicial killings by allegedly the Nigerian army in Oyigbo, too, in Rivers. What assessment has the Minister made of those most recent reports? This is still carrying on after those shocking events that we have seen just a few weeks ago. Mr. Chair, the violent repression of protesters in Nigeria is unacceptable and has garnered, rightly, international condemnation. President-elect Biden has called on the Nigerian government to end the violent crackdown. The UN Secretary-General has said that Nigerians' right to protest peacefully needs to be guaranteed and that police brutality needs to stop. And we in the official opposition absolutely agree with those sentiments. The violent crackdown on these protests must end, and there must be accountability for those responsible for such brutality and loss of life. The Leader of the Opposition, my honourable friend, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, have made it clear that the UK must act as a force for good in the world, and we must act in line with our international partners and multinational organisations, whether that's the UN, AU, the UN Human Rights Council and others, to encourage and strongly advocate for the end of this violence in Nigeria, to end police brutality in Nigeria, and crucially to call for independent investigations into these violations by Nigerian policing, security and military forces. Obviously, it would always be better if we had confidence in the systems of investigation within a country, within Nigeria, but the ongoing failures and the ongoing record of the government in dealing with SARS, I think, underpins why so many do not have faith in that process, and that is why independent investigations will be so crucial. Now, this petition specifically refers to sanctions, and Mr Gray, we in the official opposition welcomed the Foreign Secretary's establishment of a Magnitsky-style sanctions regime, which we had been calling for since 2018, to allow for targeted sanctions based on attacks on human rights and to enable us to target the wider network of perpetrators, including all of those who facilitate, incite, promote or support such crimes. And that, of course, extends beyond state officials to non-state actors as well. And the Foreign Secretary told us at the time in the House that these would be used to target, and I quote, those with blood on their hands. Well, it's clear, Mr Gray, that individuals do have blood on their hands in relation to the activities of SARS and these atrocities over the last few months. And given the allegations against members of SARS and the growing evidence of the atrocities that were committed, we would urge the UK government to use its full investigative capacity, including drawing on the evidence provided by independent human rights organisations in Nigeria and elsewhere, to identify individuals responsible for these atrocities and, if appropriate, designate them for sanctions under our Magnitsky regime. We cannot stand by in the face of such willful perpetration of human rights violations and killings, not least given our close political, economic and security relationship with Nigeria. We cannot be a disinterested or unconnected party. I want to turn, Mr Gray, to the UK's own role in relation to SARS, and we've heard this from a number of members in the debate so far. Despite initially denying it, the Minister for Africa has admitted that through the Conflict Stabilisation and Security Fund in Nigeria, SARS members were trained as part of the Nigeria policing programme, and that the UK government has been involved in training of members of SARS, despite that happening during a time when there were ongoing public, well-known allegations of extrajudicial executions, extortion, torture and rape by this unit. And I'm sorry to say, Mr Gray, but this is, while a shocking, it is unfortunately not an entirely unexpected revelation to me. And it's also not surprising, and I have the review of the programme here, Mr Gray, that this was a programme led by the Foreign Office rather than DFID. Of course, UK support for security and justice reform in countries around the world can have positive impacts. But what's absolutely clear to me is that in a growing number of cases, it is not clear what impact we are having, or whether in the worst cases we are actually supporting agencies who have a role in committing atrocities or human rights violations. This is just one example. whether it's this example or the ongoing supplying of arms to the Saudi Arabian government for use in the Yemen crisis, or the training of the Special Investigations Unit in Bahrain, which has also been complicit in the torture of prisoners, and of course they use the death penalty. The government is having to repeatedly have to come and justify its involvement with organisations and institutions that appear to breach our very own standards, let alone international law and human rights. So can the Minister tell me whether she has considered suspending support and training for such programmes for Nigerian security, military and justice institutions until she is absolutely satisfied that they are not supporting individuals and organisations who have been implicated in these atrocities? And will the government commit to a review of the effectiveness of OSJA projects? I was extraordinary to reading the summary, Mr Gray, to find that the programme was listed as scoring an A and an A in 2018-19, and that the risk was only medium. This does sound to me to be completely, out of kilter with the facts that we have heard today and that we've been hearing for many, many years. And of course, looking beyond Nigeria, given the deeply concerning news that we're hearing coming out from locations across Africa in recent weeks, what measures is the government taking to protect human rights across the continent and to tackle those responsible, whether those responsible for atrocities in Ethiopia or those who are involved in suppressing the democratic process in Tanzania and Uganda? We cannot have impunity for those taking out atrocities or war crimes, whatever their role or status, whether that's official, unofficial, official government sources, official military sources, or irregular forces who are acting on behalf of different groups, whether those are central governments, regional governments, rebel groups. It doesn't matter who they are. We cannot have impunity for those people who are carrying these out. And it appears to me a double irony, Mr Gray, that we are seeing support for wrong programmes like this when the government, we hear, is proposing cutting the right programmes, proposing cutting the 0.7% target, proposing cutting support to development and peace programmes across the world. And I hope the Minister will be able to perhaps reassure us that that is not going to happen. But Mr Gray, in conclusion, from the Black Lives Matter movement in the USA to the NSARS movement in Nigeria, it's clear that any democratic government must respond to the needs, first and foremost, of its citizens in providing policing and security that is accountable to the people that it serves, does not hold itself above the law, but defends the law and conducts itself in line with the principles and values that underpin it. We stand on the side of all of those in Nigeria who are calling for peace, for democracy and for the rule of law to be upheld. Killings must end, democracy and the rule of law must prevail, and the UK should be a partner to all Nigerians seeking peace, justice and development.
Wendy Morton.
Thank you, Mr Gray, and it's a pleasure to take part in this debate this afternoon under your excellent guidance and chairmanship, so thank you. Let me start by saying that I'm very grateful to my honourable friend, the member for Chipping Barnet, for securing this debate, and actually to all the members who have contributed today. We've heard from the member for Tonbridge and Marling, from Edmonton, Lewisham East, West Ham and others, and for all the contributions that you have made. I will endeavour to answer as many of your questions as I possibly can. I can't say within the time allowed because we're doing quite well on the time at the moment, I think, Mr Gray, but I know you will keep me in good order and not let me get carried away here. But this is an important debate, and the Minister for Africa has asked me to offer his apologies to those of you here in the House, and as he is away on ministerial business and he's therefore not able to attend. But I do know he has a very close interest in this topic, and I feel sure that he will be following this debate with great attention, as we would expect of the Minister for Africa. So I will therefore respond on behalf of the government in his place. We are grateful to the nearly 220,000 members of the public who signed the petition and enabled this debate to take place. There is, quite rightly, significant public concern about the recent protests in Nigeria, especially the issue of police brutality. I also acknowledge the strong feeling about this issue in this place, and I am thankful for the contributions from all colleagues today. And as I said, I will try to respond to all of the points raised. But first, let me set out the government's position on the protests and on police reform, and then I will address the topic of sanctions. I would like to assure the House that the Government is following developments in Nigeria since the protests very closely. We are deeply concerned by violence during the protests, which tragically claimed lives. And I'm sure honourable members here today will join me in passing on our condolences to the families of those affected. The UK supports the right to peaceful protest. We condemn violence by any party, and in doing so, make an important distinction between the rioting and looting that took place and the original peaceful protest movement. We have raised the protests and the response to them at the highest levels within the Nigerian Government. The Foreign Secretary issued a statement on the 21st of October calling for an end to the violence. He called for the Nigerian Government to urgently investigate reports of brutality by its security forces and to hold those responsible to account. The Minister for Africa spoke to Foreign Minister Onyema on the 23rd of October to reiterate his tweets that recognised the Nigerian people's democratic and peaceful calls for reform and encouraged the Nigerian authorities to restore peace and to address concerns over brutality towards civilians. The British High Commissioner in Abuja continues to raise the protests with senior representatives of the Nigerian Government, including our concerns about intimidation of civil society groups and peaceful activists. We welcome President Buhari's decision to disband the Federal Special Anti-Robbery Squad, the police unit at the centre of recent protests. And it's important that historic reports of police brutality and violence during recent protests are investigated fully. We also welcome the emerging dialogue between state governors and young people. In a country where more than 50% of the population is under 25, this conversation is so important in understanding the concerns of the next generation. And we also welcome the President's request for his Cabinet Ministers to do the same in their home areas. And lastly, we welcome the establishment of judicial panels of inquiry to investigate all the alleged incidents. I can also update members that the Minister for Africa spoke to the Governor of Lagos on the 11th of November. And he also spoke to the President's Chief of Staff, Ibrahim Gambari, on the 21st of November. He stressed the importance of police and military cooperation with the panels. He also expressed the urgent need for panels to progress investigations, including into the incident at Lekki. As you see from the Government's written response to this petition, we continue to monitor these investigations and their outcomes very closely. We also continue to monitor progress on police reform and to support Nigerian-led reform.